This is Paul with Aura Coaching and Education Services, and I'm here with ADHD coach Sheila, and really excited about this one. I came across Sheila's content on TikTok and was really blown away with how much she's able to put out and really how on point that the information that she's sharing about the executive functions that are happening under the surface when we're talking about something like ADHD or autism or really just, I mean, that's the thing. Everybody has executive functions happening within them, and we're all some subset of that. So blown away by Sheila. Won't take much more time bragging on her, and I'll just turn it over to her and let her tell us a little bit about how she became an ADHD coach.
It's such a long story. I'm going to try to condense it into like the smallest amount. I've worked with neurodivergence my whole life. Mostly like my family is all neurodivergent. And I have a big family that's very kind of close-knit and in each other's business. And so trying to figure out their behaviors and how to support them and tutoring my cousins and my siblings. And, I'm the oldest of like 16 cousins or whatever that all, and so trying to do that kind of led me into then getting jobs in like respite care. And for a minute, I was an ABA therapist, not knowing how harmful that was. But I did tutoring. I was a special education teacher in a self-contained behavior classroom for a long time. And that was the greatest job. But when the pandemic hit, it didn't make a lot of money because it was a nonprofit that I was working for. And so I was doing some ADHD coaching on the side, which was a suggestion from one of my friends was working with this businessman. And he was like, oh, I'm dealing with all this business stuff. That seems like there's a lot of emotions going on with my clients. And I don't really know how to deal with that side of it. And my friend was like, oh, if you wanted, someone to help with people and emotions, like talk to Sheila or whatever. So he ended up kind of coaching me into becoming a coach so that I could help him. But the ADHD stuff just took off. Like that clearly was the space where people needed a lot of support and didn't even know that was an option, And so because I was teaching high school, my students had me on TikTok. And so, you have to keep up. If I don't know the TikToks, like I'm just not cool. They're not going to do their math. So like I had to make that. And so I started making videos on there, just talking about ADHD coaching, see what would happen. And within a month, I think I had 30,000 followers on there, and just people being like, what? ADHD coaching is a thing. That's what ADHD is, like you're telling me that I'm not just lazy and like, and I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you that. And so when the pandemic hit, teaching online was not something I was good at. And I also had some health issues that I needed a more flexible schedule. And so TikTok allowed me to do the ADHD coaching full time. And it's been amazing, actually. Yeah. There was one, oh no, I'm not going to remember his name, but there's one like of these businessmen, and he's like an exit coach. So he helps people like to get to sell their businesses or whatever. And he invited me onto his podcast to talk about business coaching and why coaching in general is like a good idea. And we ended up just talking about ADHD, and it's like, oh, he has ADHD, but it's not a problem because he's got a lot of money and resources and people to do the boring stuff for him. Right. And then he invited me to guest write a blog for him on entrepreneurship and ADHD. So, and how that we're more likely to become entrepreneurs if we have these privileges, if we have these opportunities. We're also more likely to be in prison if we don't, so I thought that was it's just a good reflection of how our environments and our opportunities and how people react to us can influence like where we end up,
Right. That really goes into some of the core foundations of my coaching. Maybe we can chat on this one a little bit, but the coaching program that I jumped into after my career in education is IPEC. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's really for executives. It's a big global leadership. It's well thought of, and one of the foundational principles or just understandings is what we believe encapsulates our thoughts. And those thoughts create our emotions, and those emotions create the action that we have in the world. And every way I've tried to beat that up, I can't do it. What we believe. And now we're talking about what is our belief in ourselves. I'm a piece of crap. Okay. So we believe we're a piece of crap. We have thoughts that are encapsulated by being a piece of crap. And then we have the emotions related to what it feels like to get called that, and we're doing it to ourselves. And then, whoa, now we're looking at maybe lazy. Now we're looking at hesitation. We're looking at things of like, I don't feel like I can do something right. And maybe those messages that they're getting around them are just reinforcing by calling it lazy. It's like, I don't feel lazy. I'm working hard over here, but I'm just stuck.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get frustrated with the mindset or like, oh, your beliefs shape your reality, because there are some ways that you can say that puts the responsibility on that person alone, right? I need to somehow change my beliefs and my ideas about the world and myself. But we don't learn and grow and regulate alone, like in a vacuum. Like, we are social creatures, and we change our beliefs by changing our environment, by changing the people that are around us. Like, I'm not going to, if I've been told and experienced that I'm a piece of crap my whole life, I'm not in an environment where a bunch of people are going like, well, you're just going to fail again. I don't know why you keep trying. I don't know why you start these hobbies. You never follow through. I don't know why you have that environment. I don't think it's really possible. I mean, every once in a while, someone has that spiritual awakening or that like big, aha moment, and they're able to do that. But for most of us, we don't in that environment go, I'm going to change I can do it. I actually, everything I've been taught and everything that I've seen and experienced must be wrong. And I can just, flip that switch and change my mentality and my belief system. That's not how it works,
Right.
And so knowing that is the truth, that it is hugely related to our beliefs and our thoughts that lead to our emotions and our actions, and that is extremely important. How do we change people's beliefs? What is the reality of that? And really, it's through experiences. And in my experience, a lot of that is through, I teach a class on self-talk. I think that is the one thing you can do for yourself, is that reparenting, sort of learning how to coach yourself and talk yourself through things in a nice, gentle way. That doesn't mean like, I'm so beautiful, I'm so smart. Like, it's just like, oh, I'm like noticing, like, I'm experiencing some executive dysfunction right now. Okay, what do I need? Am I hungry?
Noticing.
Am I stressed? Am I, naming too, like really like stuff like that. And the really big part is community, right? Meeting other people who are like you, and then fighting that shame through community, through just seeing, like, normalizing these behaviors and these struggles. And that's why I have, the classes and the groups that I run, I think is just magic, because I can teach, I have great tips and tricks, I have great stuff, but really the most healing thing is somebody in the group, saying, I struggle to brush my teeth and I have a lot of shame around that. And then someone else hearing that and crying and being like, I thought I was the only one. I know people tell me I'm so gross and I'm like this and this and that. I struggle with hygiene, and just having that be normalized and be like, we have to start with acceptance. We can get to a point where you can brush your teeth, but we're not going to get there by shaming you and expecting you to just flip the switch and do that tomorrow, right? We got to start with acceptance and like meet people where they're at. And so the groups really help with it. Community really helps with that.
Yeah, it sounds like it really, just coaching 101, you need to be able to acknowledge and validate where somebody is at, and hold that space without any kind of judgment or anything like that, so that they can experience it long enough to be able to maybe think about it in a new kind of way. And then, exercising those thoughts. That's really beautiful, the way that community provides. So sorry, I'm dinging over here, but the way that the community that you're building provides a space for that acknowledgement and validation.
Yeah. And ideally, like, when I have a group, they have a Discord. So we meet once a week, but the Discord, they're just talking throughout the week, and I'm just checking in, kind of watching, giving like tips here and there, sharing a video or whatever. But once once the group is over, the 6 to 8 weeks or whatever's over, they could do another round, or a bunch of them have just been like, we're making our own Discord. We are now like an accountability group of our own, and just like creating these little pods, this like ripple effect, to me is so powerful and so exciting, the idea, because I can't coach everybody. We can't have 3,000 ADHD coaches, and people can't afford it forever. I'm trying to work myself out of a job, really. I want people to be able to support each other, and that this information is just out there. And so if I can, creating little pods of community to like throw out into the world and let that kind of spread is really exciting to me.
Yeah, I can really relate to that one for sure. I hone in on how do I get coaching, into the schools, the place that is real important to me. I love schools. I want them to thrive. And I think that this is a great tool for it. But man, I don't want to coach everyone. we're better together. Like I think when we can have these kind of talks and talk about, just like you said, what is ADHD coaching? Well, I got you 30,000 followers like that, because people are wondering like, oh, is there more?
Yeah.
Which brings me to, I just sat in a 504 meeting for one of my clients, and I offer advocacy. If I have a client, I don't want to spend all my time doing that kind of work, but if it's a client, I want to come to the school meeting and make sure they have good plans in place and everything like that. And it's like there's a different language that can be spoken about ADHD now that the schools just aren't speaking. What are your thoughts there, as somebody that used to be a teacher, used to work in schools, used to be a special education teacher? So you know those systems well. They lean heavily on kind of that ABA goal setting, goal writing kind of framework and things like that. So what are your thoughts? What do schools need to know?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I haven't spent that much time in general education schools, like in regular quote unquote schools. I did my student teaching in some schools in Los Angeles, and it was hard because it was a lot of people trying to do well in a system that wouldn't allow them to, but the school that I worked at, it's called Serendipity Center in Portland, Oregon, and it's a nonprofit, and it's a school that is, trauma informed, and it's not perfect. School can be, but it was very different. Like, the way that we, it was very like collaborative problem solving. There's a lot of like Ross W. Green trainings, for things like that, and very recognizing of the person. And so there wasn't, there was no punishments. There was not, sometimes there was reward systems to like buy the kids in, just to get them to like develop a rapport with you. But really what carries them on is, they're like, well, I'm doing, I'm writing an English paper for a piece of candy maybe, but then they've written that paper and you go, oh my God, this is amazing. Can you read it out loud in class? Like, look at this. And then they just want to do it. They don't need a candy next time, so that those rewards and things were always temporary. And it was always, it was never, there was never an understanding that that's going to solve the problem, right? Reward and punishment never solve the issue, right? It's all about like skills and meeting their needs.
Yeah. That brings me, I'm trying to bring back all my old ABA lingo, but there's the thing where you provide some kind of reinforcement and then you pair it with something else and try to minimize that to take off. That's the structure in my mind, is you're pairing that with human connection, authentic connection, a validation of where they're at, and even those small little steps to help them be able to attach their consciousness to their forward movement and things like that makes a big difference. But the old Cheeto M&M game.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, because I didn't go to school for ABA. It was a very weird situation where I was doing respite work. So I was just like a behavioral. So I was just helping families with their kids that were very behavioral and extremely like aggressive, because these kids had trauma aside from their neurodivergence. Like they really didn't, and then they had been punished for that aggression, but the aggression was because they weren't getting their needs met because they were, they were traumatized. Right. And so I was able to, have a rapport with these kids and things like that. And so when one of my clients had, she got approved for ABA, and we had like 4 different ABA therapists come in and leave crying, just like, she attacked me. She can't act like this. That was my favorite. It was like, she can't act like this. And I was like, yeah, that's why we're here. We're not.
Apparently
like,
she can do it.
Yeah, right. I'm like, you go ahead, tell her that she can't, you know what I mean? And so on it, like the ABA company just came to me and said, look, if you can, I'll, kind of tutor you. And if you can pass this test, we'll make you an ABA therapist so you can do it, because we can't get anyone else to do it. And I was like, okay.
Wow. So you got the shortcut.
I got the shortcut.
That's a lot of hours.
I had to do some training on a computer or whatever, but I didn't go to school for it. I don't know. That company doesn't exist anymore. So I guess I can't get them in trouble.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, but, doing that ABA immediately I found issues with some of the things that they were wanting me to do. And a lot of that is that there's a mentality of like trying to break the person, trying to break a horse sort of thing. And it's a lot of trying to get them to ignore their needs and their intuition about themselves. And that's something we do to every child, right? That's something I would love to see more in schools, is less of that, more of like meeting that kid's needs, teaching skills. And so like, the ABA, there are some really helpful principles, right? Like even a replacement behavior. Like if I'm biting my nails, I'm going to get a fidget. Cool. Like there's nothing problematic about some of these like tenets, but the mindset behind it is like behaviors are only for these 4 reasons. And we need to make these people like normal, you know, trying to get them to act normal. And I mean, you know, I had some clients, it broke my heart. I had an older gentleman that I was working with who was autistic, and he loved this little toy. I think it was like a princess or something like that. And it like spun, and he just loved it and wanted to have that. And you know, I gave it to, so I let him keep it. It was in like a little bin of things like fidgets and stuff that I had brought. And his group home manager told me that he couldn't have it because it was like, what is the word? It takes away his dignity to be a grown man playing with this toy. And I was like, he wants it, he likes it. I think it's taking away his dignity to assume that you know better for this grown ass man. Like just like allow him to have this toy. And I, you know, and that sort of thing was really difficult and frustrating. And you know, and just the idea like, well, you have to, in order to get your needs met, you have to go through these specific social structures that we've deemed necessary that just don't make any real sense, you know?
Right. So, well, you know, for me as an individual, it's like really clear to recognize that I don't like it when people tell me what I'm doing or why I'm doing something or what it's causing. And I don't like that very much, you know, and it's amazing within the space, especially when we're working with, you know, people that have like communication disorders and things like that. That's a lot to put an intention on them and then operate as such. You know, it's tearing the fabric of the reality up like that. That's a really, really difficult thing to have to manage. So.
Yeah, it's the idea of I'm going to change your behavior as opposed to, hey, we can see this problem. Maybe you're hitting people, maybe you're biting yourself, maybe you're, you know, and maybe you need to just learn how to tie your shoes. Okay, do you want to learn this? Like, you know, like,
and how might it feel if, you know, all those great coaching things.
Yeah. And so a lot of, you know, just collaboration, like really treating the person as a person, which seems very, like logical, but yeah, I think that there's a lot of, and this is the same in schools where it's a top down, you know, like we're telling you, this is how you behave. This is, every kid has their own wisdom. Every kid has wisdom about the world and wisdom about themselves. You know, they know, what they need to do to regulate, you know. An example, I was visiting my nephew, he's 4, and I had stayed for a couple of weeks, and we, you know, had a great time. And then I was packing my car up to go to the airport, and he starts just running in circles around my car. And his dad is like, stop that, you know, whatever. And, you know, and I'm thinking, this kid knows exactly what he needs to regulate in this moment. It's very stimulating. I'm leaving, I'm packing, there's all this moving. He's got to deal with, he's going to miss me. And, you know, there's a bunch of people standing outside and all this stuff. And he knows what his body needs in that moment. He just needed to run around the car. But dad says, no, that's weird. That's not normal. Sit down. So now what? Where do those feelings go? Where do those emotions go? And they end up a lot of the time either becoming either aggression toward others. People always tell me what to do. I don't have to, right? You start getting that, or the internalized, there's something wrong with me. You know, I'm bad, I'm this, I got to hold my feelings in. I can't share them. They're bad. And so I think that just watching kids and seeing, okay, well, maybe running around the car maybe it's dangerous. Maybe it's in the street, right? Hey, can we run around on the sidewalk? Hey, can we run around in the living room with the, you know, around the couch where it's soft, or, you know, how can we take that expression and that wisdom that kids and adults, you know, like we've lost a lot of connection to that, but it's still in there, you know, and how can we just allow for a different outlet as opposed to, you know, squashing all of that expression.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw kind of an example of that. Similarly, there's a neuroscientist out in the world, Andrew Huberman. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he just explains things incredibly well, and you can talk about, you know, kind of the new agey neuroscience. You know, he's just one of those guys that's speaking at a new level on things, and it kind of challenges some of the old ways of looking. But, you know, our breath is just well studied, you know, and all of the ways that it affects our physiology when we do it in different ways. And one of the breaths that he was just kind of teaching people if they're feeling a little anxious is just a quick, you know, it's in. And And then he says, it's like when a baby, a kid is crying and you see him and they're kind of finishing and they're like, and they're kind of doing that weird little thing. And then usually their dad's over there, their teacher's there. It's like, calm down. And like they are. Maybe they're doing the thing that their body was designed to do. And then you have to think about it. Now they have to think about you though. They were busy,
Yeah.
So like, those are the kind of, I think you're just spot on with like, let's watch what might truly the kid be like serving in their body. And so much of the time, like we do all kinds of stuff to try to regulate our nervous system. As adults, it's a beer. It's all these habits. It's like, I'm going to stay up late, will binge watch something all night long because I don't have to listen to someone yell at me anymore. And I can just be by myself for a little bit. All these kinds of things. We're constantly trying to regulate ourselves back to baseline.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and, that something that I, deal with in some of my classes and groups is the idea of adjusting your baseline, because some of us have been in fight or flight for so many years. That is baseline, right? And that was something, I talked to a lot of my clients. They're like, well, how come I have such a hair trigger? How can I go from calm to explosive so fast? And I'm like, because you weren't calm. You weren't there. You were up here already, and there's only this much. And I think especially with ADHD, our minds, we're very good at reactivity. Well, I'm good in a crisis. I'm good. You give me a problem, I'll solve it in that moment. Proactive, not really usually our thing, right? Like that's a little bit harder to get ourselves to self-motivate and plan ahead when it's not really in the moment. But a lot of those things like nervous system regulation stuff, it has to be, and communication stuff it has to be proactive. You got to be making that part of your day. If you're just trying to regulate when you're already here, you're going to have a harder time. It's kind of too late. There are some good things. It's good to know that. But if you're doing those system regulating things on the regular, if you have, when I was working in home with autistic kids, like they all had a sensory diet. They had, at 2:00, we're going to do wall push-ups. And then at 4:00, we're going to play with the sand. And then we're going to play with the putty over here and do this and that. And like, why don't, adults can have that as well. You can have I do a barefoot walk to the park and, when it's warm, and I do, these little things throughout the bubble bath, maybe, or even just having fidgets around, like having little things throughout the day. Maybe it's a breathing practice, something like that, to kind of just improve your baseline so you don't hit that thing. And that would be something, again, like I would love to see in schools, is just maybe a little transition activity between each class where they're taking 3 breaths, one, and then the next one they're jumping up and down for 30 seconds. And then the next one they're little things.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things in blocks, in the principal days, like building the master schedule of how this whole thing is going to work is, I think it might take an ADHD brain to some degree. Like it's really a lot. But then it takes a lot of people around them to get the grunt work of it done, because it's just a ton. For the schools to be able to really, I think, start adjusting to making school more reflect how people actually work, to put it just kind of bluntly, like they're going to have to change how they do things drastically. I think they're just going to have to change drastically. They're going to have to change what they value. And it's going to have to be more about the development of a kid's sense of self that comes from within. I think a lot of people look at ADHD through like this, it's a low dopamine disorder. Well, okay. Well, if you're growing some kind of life that you can see yourself in, well, there's the motivation, there's the dopamine, there's the, it starts to all make a heck of a lot more sense. Instead of everything just coming down, you have to do this to be successful. College is the way to do it. You're getting all of these messages that kids can't find themselves in, and they are stuck, AKA lazy, AKA defiant, AKA all these other terms we have for it.
Yeah. And I have my beliefs about the ideal system, which doesn't look like public school at all, right? But it just doesn't. It looks like, smaller communities where there's a lot of relationship and a lot. I like, apprenticeship tends to work really well for 80 years. Just show me how to do it, talk me through it. Let me do it with my hands. Let me touch it. Let me feel it. Let me experience it.
And like your ABA.
Yeah. And that's the way I did that. Right. Yeah. I got through school. I somehow got a master's degree and a teaching credential and all of those things, but it took me a long time, and it took a toll on my nervous system, on my brain. That was not the way that I like to learn. And some of us, I'm lucky I don't have a co-occurring, well, that's not true. I have dyscalculia, but because my degree was like psychology, history, and education, that didn't really matter that much. I had to get through like one stats class.
Run away. Yeah.
Yeah. But for, like a lot of ADHDers end up also having dyscalculia or dyslexia, dysgraphia, processing, auditory processing issues, like things like that. Which make it a lot harder to learn, which, I didn't have those issues. So I could go to class, listen to a lecture, totally ignore my homework and still get a B in the class. I could, that's how ADHDers get through. But if I had like that, my sister has like the verbal processing issues. And so she can't listen to a lecture and then just remember that, like that doesn't work for her. And she learns very well with her hands and through doing things, but like she wanted to be a marine biologist. She's ADHD. And it's not possible. Like it's not possible in our society for her to reach her goal. So my mother was a surgeon's assistant way back in the day and didn't go to school for it, just worked her way up, watched the doctor, all of that, and then left to go have 4 kids, came back and they were like, no, you need like an 8-year degree to do that. She's like, but I know how to do it. And they're like, sorry, so she also like ADHD, And so I really think that providing other avenues of learning, just making it so, like, I don't know who, like I do know who, but someone decided that school looks like sitting down and reading books. You can get that same information, and I've made videos about this where I'm like, I think that you could become a doctor without sitting through all of this school. I think that you could, maybe you have to pass a test or something like that, but even test taking, what does that test look like? Can that look like telling me? Can that look like showing me? Can that, like changing that? And people are like, well, I don't want a doctor that doesn't have a degree, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, let me tell you, I have a history degree. I did the work. I got actually pretty good grades. I don't know schneik about history. Like I know nothing about history. And I know that there are doctors who have, who got through school and didn't retain anything, and that but there are also, I have friends who are, just hyper focused on medical issues that know more than the doctor, like our ADHD brains, like we're able to really be autodidacts, like teach ourselves. And so I would love to see in schools different avenues for learning. Just, if you're the person that is great with sit down with a book and just teach yourself, that should be an option. If you need an apprenticeship and to do this with your hands, that should be an option. If you like lecture and discussion, like that should be an option, and there's, unschooling is a great trying to get there. I don't know if you're familiar with like the whole unschooling movement, and you do see, I mean, the problem with that is that you do see those families that are just like, well, he plays video games all day and I guess that's what he wants to do. And you're like, that's not the point, the ideal is that they just have, you give them a lot of opportunity. Hey, how do you feel? Do you like space? Do you like animals? Do you like plants? Do you like, whatever it is? And then taking that and turning it into like full lessons. And like you were saying, like having that be dopamine driven, having that be interest driven, having that be them finding their sense of selves. And if they, are obsessed with trucks, then okay, we can write a poem about trucks. So now we're learning about rhyming, and then we can make a model truck. And now there's some art, like all of that. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. You designed it. I like it. I'll make the schedule. Let's go. So, no, I think that's phenomenal. Yeah. For me personally, it's man, I spent so long in schools, for somebody that hated school, like I spent a lot of time in schools and then it like became it. Like I'm a principal now, that's a crazy thing. And, I don't know. There was just always this part of me that felt like I was one of the cogs. And then I became I don't know, you could become a bigger cog or a smaller one. You do less movement, more stuff goes. I guess that's probably it. But, I'm one of those cogs and it's just moving. And if I'm going to be a part of this thing, I just have to keep doing what it's doing. And then you can kind of branch out and try, but the system will try to bucket back in place, as fast as possible. And that's just the individuals being defensive because we don't like change, and I can recognize those. But if I take a really big step back and I look at school, it is the thing that changed. In the grand scheme of humans, that is what changed. And I think it might be doing some harms that we're not looking at. And I think we might be blaming these lazy children as a result.
I mean, I 100% agree. And I know a lot of people who have a lot of rage towards school. I have a few friends who dropped out of school, dropped out of high school, and one of them's the executive director of a nonprofit going on for years. The other one runs her own successful business. And they have a lot of anger about what school did to them. I was very privileged. I went to a good school in Southern California, a suburb of LA. And I I'm a white girl. I'm sort of silly and charming. And I was able to sort of a lot of the time charm my teachers into allowing me to get away with stuff, which allowed me
I've
to not,
totally been there.
And I involved myself in extracurriculars. I was like in the mass media, like making we had math, it was LA area. So our teacher was like a CNN news person or whatever, and had, I had, privilege helps. And so I had this ability to find a lot of joy and interest in school. I was in the plays, I was in art classes. I was able to run around with a camera and film things. So I don't have the trauma from school that a lot of people do. I definitely have the shame about my desk was never clean. I lost my assignments. I was late on things, like a lot of things like that, but, and math in general, because I didn't know I had dyscalculia, and I had teachers that would tell me, that I just was lazy. I lost you. Where'd you go?
So sorry about that. I'm back. I'm back.
But
yeah, right. And I think your experience right there too is like, school is also wonderful. It's full of wonderful people working so hard, but I think you said it earlier, they're just like these great people that are in this thing that they if they just had the autonomy to do their job, I think it would look different.
I agree.
And that I just think it would look different. And I understand that there's got to be a culture and ways of doing things and all of that, but just don't know if we've taken a look at the evidence at this point on some of our systems. Yeah,
I think a huge part of it too is just the size of the classroom. Like me being a sort of extroverted ADHD kid, I like, and even though I wasn't traumatized by schools, I see other people like that. And I don't think that, I still believe that the system needs to be changed, even though it sort of worked for me. Because just because it worked for me doesn't mean it should work, and it didn't fully work for me. But one of the things is, as a sort of extrovert, and I was a very, I guess, flamboyant dresser. I dressed very strangely. I was noticed by my teachers. They knew me by name. That is not the case for most of those kids. And as a teacher who had, 200 students, trying to do that in the gen ed classes, you can't have a personal relationship with every kid. And especially, in the upper level classes, like it's just, there's no way I tried so hard to know all of their names. That was like that was the bare minimum I could try to do. And I would like try to put, situations in, like right before grades come out, I want to meet with each of them for 5 minutes. I'll put a movie on and, okay, we're each going to talk for 5 minutes just so I can like get a little bit of FaceTime in and let them know, but there's no way for me to have a real relationship that is encouraging, that is problem solving, that is, with all of those kids. And so many kids, if you're quiet, you're shy, you're insecure, you're whatever, you go through school invisible. To those teachers and maybe even to the other students, and how traumatizing is that?
And if we're just being real about what adolescence is, what childhood is, and that whole process, it's like you're individuating to become your own human. Not only that, you're doing it by wiring in habits. I don't think that habit is going to serve you well when you're an autonomous adult, having to figure out how to do it all. That's a lot to overcome.
Absolutely.
That's a lot to overcome at that point. Sheila, this is so much fun. Just chatting and finding out more about you. And I guess I just want to give a big old thank you for doing the good deed of bringing coaching into a space where I think it's just super needed. Thanks for all the content you're throwing out there. I'm learning a lot about how to put myself out there watching your stuff, and I really appreciate it. If you had one big message for the world to leave here regarding ADHD, executive functioning, all the stuff that you do, what would it be?
I think that aside from all the, I mean, I, I guess the one that I'm sort of focused on right now, I just started a YouTube channel and a show called Brain Interviews, where I'm interviewing people about their brains. And so far I interviewed 2 of my neurotypical friends, right? But I have a few interviews that are on their way. But trying to understand the idea of neurodiversity as more than just a collection of diagnoses. Because the more I talk to people, the more I understand some people have an internal monologue. Some people think in pictures. Some people think spatially. Some people understand numbers. Some people understand words. Some people, because they don't have an internal monologue, they don't have words in their head. There's a translation process. And every time they speak, they have to translate, and so it doesn't come out properly. Some people have those processing difficulties where they're only taking in maybe 60, 70% of what you're saying. And maybe they're only able to output 60% of what they mean. People have different problem solving processes. They have different sensory processes. They have different needs. They have different nervous systems. We have there is such a diversity and a variety that we don't even understand yet. We don't even understand how brains work yet. And I think that a lot of what people do is, if I fit in this box, if I fit this diagnosis, then I don't need to have shame and I deserve support. But if I don't fit into a diagnosis, it's just me and I'm bad. Right. Or if I can't do things this way, I'm bad. And if that person is doing things that way, they're bad. This is how you should do things. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. And even like talking about sleep, like there's like delayed sleep phase syndrome. Like we have different sleep rhythms. So that kid that can't get up in the morning, that kid that's always late, like they cannot control that. Like if you can't, go to bed at a reasonable hour, hating yourself, you literally might have a completely different circadian rhythm. So having an understanding that we all work differently and switching from judgment to curiosity. Just that.
I hear you say that often, from judgment to curiosity. I think that's so brilliant. And brain interviews is amazing, by the way. That sounds really cool. If you ever want a guy that, used to have one brain and then got Lyme disease and, has things living in it and all that kind of stuff that has to deal with a different kind of brain, can talk between those. I would love to be on a brain interview.
Heck yeah, we'll definitely.
Yes, that sounds good.
It.
Well, awesome, Sheila. Well, thank you so much for the chat today. I really appreciate it. For me, it just helps, just like you said, put the little ripples out there in little pods of people and bring awareness that, there might just be a different way to kind of approach things like ADHD and autism and humans in general. So I think that's pretty cool. Thank you, Sheila. Really appreciate you.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.